Open the official United States Geological Survey website right now. Look at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory dashboard. You will see a green shield, the word normal, written next to it. It has been green for years. It is green today. It tells you that the deep magma chamber beneath the park is quiet. It tells you that the supervolcano is asleep. It tells you that you are safe. But then you look at what actually happened on June 13th, 2026. You look at Biscuit Basin. You look at a place where thousands of families walked just hours before. The ground tore open. It did not rumble. It did not give a warning. It simply exploded. Boiling water, dark, thick mud, and jagged rock debris shot hundreds of feet into the cold morning air. When the steam finally cleared, there was a new 60-foot fissure carved directly into the earth. A brand new thermal pool had formed, draining a thick, milky-gray runoff straight into the Firehole River. This happened roughly 100 to 200 feet north of Black Diamond Pool, and it happened with zero deep magmatic seismic swarms beforehand. Not a single warning from the deep earth. Every time I see Yellowstone news, my heart drops thinking the supervolcano is finally erupting, but then it is called just a hydrothermal explosion. How can exploding ground with rocks flying everywhere be considered normal? I ask myself that question every single day now. Am I being misled into feeling safe by the green normal status while the shallow plumbing beneath Yellowstone is violently shifting under our feet? If steam explosions can blast rocks hundreds of feet into the air without any earthquake warnings, how do we really know when the geothermal equilibrium breaks? The scary part is not magma coming up. The scary part is that these hydrothermal blasts happen in heavily populated tourist zones, like Biscuit Basin, with literally zero seismic warning. Yesterday, I made a mistake. A very specific, very humiliating mistake. For 22 years, I worked as a reference librarian at the Municipal Public Library. For 2 decades, I was the one responsible for processing and cataloging the technical publications that arrived from the United States Geological Survey every single month. I routed those heavy, dense geological reports to the science section. I scanned the indexes. I stamped the covers. And for 22 years, I rarely read past the table of contents. I thought I knew what they said. I thought the data on the page was the entire truth of the world. Yesterday, I looked at the archived report from June 13th. I saw the green alert. I saw the word normal. I told myself everything was fine. I let the official designation dictate my reality. But the paper said normal, and the ground said otherwise. I realized that for 22 years, I had been cataloging data about hydrothermal risks without ever truly absorbing what those words meant in the physical world. I knew Yellowstone exclusively through feeds and monitors in Springfield, Missouri, more than 1,200 miles away. I had never stood on the boardwalks. I had never felt the heat of the crust. I let the paperwork blind me to the violence of the reality. The Earth does not care about our green shields because this is not a one-time anomaly. 2 years earlier, on July 23, 2024, Black Diamond Pool itself exploded. Tourists were right there on the footpaths. They recorded massive plumes of scalding steam and flying rocks completely destroying the visitor boardwalks. And again, no deep magmatic tremor signature, no warning from the depths, just a localized shallow infrasound explosion that ripped the surface apart. The University of Utah Seismograph stations, the very network that monitors the park in real time, recorded nothing in the hours prior that would suggest a magma migration. Their instruments are calibrated to listen to the deep earth, to the tectonic grinding of plates and the slow rise of molten rock. But this event lived entirely in the top 200 feet of the crust. Our instruments are essentially blind to these shallow thermal pressure spikes. The lack of deep earthquake swarms before Biscuit Basin exploded makes me feel like our monitoring systems are looking in the wrong direction. This brings us to a record that has bothered me for a very long time, a document that does not belong in the geological archives, but which describes this exact mechanism with terrifying precision. I am talking about the documented archival records attributed to a woman in Bulgaria decades ago. Baba Vanga, you have heard the name. The internet is full of claims that she predicted a catastrophic supervolcano eruption that would destroy North America. The internet says she named Yellowstone. But when you actually go to the verified archival sources, when you strip away the clickbait and the retrospective commentator overlays, you find something much more specific and much more unsettling. Baba Vanga never wrote the word Yellowstone. She never named a specific American geographical landmark. She did not describe a supervolcano erupting from the mantle. Instead, she used symbolic, highly specific language. She spoke of waters boiling from deep within the earth. She spoke of fire rising from the ground without mountain smoke. For years, people tried to force these words to fit the narrative of a magmatic super eruption. But a magmatic eruption produces ash. It produces mountain smoke. It produces the classic volcanic column. What she described was water boiling up from inside the earth without the smoke of a burning mountain. What she described matches the exact mechanics of a shallow hydrothermal explosion. What if Baba Vanga was not describing a catastrophic supervolcano magma blowout, but a sudden cascade of boiling hydrothermal earth tearing through the crust? Seeing Black Diamond Pool blow up into a 60-foot fissure makes me wonder if ancient mystics saw hydrothermal systems instead of magma, because the science behind this is undeniable, and it has been known for over 50 years. In 1971, a foundational thermodynamic model was published in the Geological Society of America Bulletin, Volume 82. The researchers established exactly how this happens. When overheated shallow water reservoirs experience a sudden pressure drop, the liquid undergoes an instantaneous, explosive phase transition into steam. The kinetic energy released is incomprehensible. It is capable of throwing massive boulders into the sky. It is capable of carving craters into solid rock. And it does all of this with zero magmatic involvement. The mechanism is entirely independent of deep crustal processes. It happens in the blink of an eye. The water flashes to steam, expands violently, and shreds the earth above it. This is what Dr. Michael Poland, the scientist in charge at the United States Geological Survey Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, confirmed about the June 13th event. The explosion was driven by superheated liquid water flashing to steam in the shallow subterranean reservoirs. It was entirely independent of magmatic movement. That is why the official volcano alert level remains at normal. The magma is not moving, but the water is. And the water is acting exactly like a bomb. The truth is, hydrothermal explosions resist prediction because they do not require deep magma movement. They do not require major earthquake swarms. They form when shallow hydrothermal seals clog up. The steam pressure spikes within the geyser plumbing, a process that can happen in a matter of hours. The pressure builds and builds against the blockage just a few dozen feet below the boots of the tourists taking photographs. The United States Geological Survey releases all raw seismic, thermal, and satellite data publicly and in real time. They are not hiding the danger, but their green rating reflects the deep volcanic system. It does not and cannot reflect the shallow hydrothermal layer which is genuinely more volatile, more chaotic, and much harder to forecast. It freaks me out that boiling water and ground fissures are opening up right under boardwalks where families walk, yet official alerts stay at green normal. Scientists say these steam blasts are not magmatic, but water flashing into instant high-pressure steam, ripping the earth open sounds terrifyingly unpredictable. And if you think a 60-foot fissure is the worst it can get, you have not read the older reports. There is a document from 2007, an open file report, Preliminary Assessment of Volcanic and Hydrothermal Hazards in Yellowstone National Park. It was compiled by Dr. Lisa A. Morgan and her colleagues. This document proves that large hydrothermal explosions occur every few thousand years in Yellowstone, and smaller ones happen annually to every few decades. This is not an anomaly. This is the park's heartbeat. The most terrifying piece of evidence in that report is Mary Bay. Mary Bay is a 1.5-mile crater in Yellowstone, 1.5 miles wide. And it was not created by magma, it was created entirely by a hydrothermal explosion. It proved that steam pressure alone can violently blow apart solid bedded rock on a massive scale, without any magmatic involvement. If a steam explosion can carve a crater 1.5 miles wide, what does normal even mean anymore? If you want to understand what a hydrothermal explosion looks like when it reaches its maximum potential, you have to look past the 60-foot fissures of today. You have to look at the geological scars that define the park. The United States Geological Survey Open File Report from 2007 did not just catalog the risks. It mapped the violence of the past. Dr. Lisa A. Morgan and her team meticulously documented the history of these events, and what they found is that Yellowstone is essentially a landscape shaped by steam. The report details how these explosions occur when the delicate balance of heat, water, and rock is suddenly disrupted. It could be a sudden drop in pressure caused by a landslide. It could be a rapid draining of a surface lake. Or it could simply be the gradual accumulation of mineral deposits sealing the vents, turning a hot spring into a subterranean bomb. When the seal finally breaks, the depressurization wave travels downward through the water column at the speed of sound. In a matter of milliseconds, thousands of gallons of superheated water flash into steam, expanding with such catastrophic force that the surrounding bedrock is pulverized. This is what happened at Mary Bay. Mary Bay is a crater 1.5 miles in diameter, located on the northern edge of Yellowstone Lake. It is the largest documented hydrothermal explosion crater on Earth. When you stand on its edge, you are not looking at the aftermath of a volcanic eruption. You are looking at the aftermath of a steam blast. The kinetic energy required to carve a hole that size into solid rock is staggering. The explosion excavated millions of tons of material, hurling debris miles away, generating massive waves across the lake and devastating the surrounding ecosystem. And it did all of this without a single drop of magma breaching the surface. The magma remained miles below, safely locked in the crust. The destruction was wrought entirely by the water that the magma had heated. This is the context that is missing from the daily reports. This is the history that the Green Alert Shield fails to communicate. The report makes it clear that while large events like Mary Bay happen every few thousand years, smaller explosions happen on a scale of decades, sometimes annually. They are a recurring, documented feature of the park. They are not an anomaly, they are the rule. The Earth is constantly shifting, the seals are constantly forming, and the pressure is constantly building. The 60-foot fissure at Biscuit Basin is just the latest, smallest echo of the violence that carved Mary Bay. And because these events are driven by shallow thermodynamic processes rather than deep magmatic movements, They happen without the deep seismic swarms that our instruments are calibrated to detect. They happen in the blind spot of our technology. This is the true scale of the threat. A crater, 1.5 miles wide, carved entirely by flashing steam. And yet, when we talk about Yellowstone, we only ever talk about the magma. We are obsessed with the deep earth, with the tectonic mechanisms that take millennia to build up. But the shallow plumbing beneath the park is alive. It is shifting right now, violently, under our feet. The explosion in Biscuit Basin was not a fluke. It was a reminder. It was the park clearing its throat. But because the official alert remains green, because the deep seismographs are quiet, we walk right out onto those boardwalks and we take our photographs. We trust the green shield on the website more than we trust the history of the ground we are standing on. Skeptics will tell you that the hydrothermal explosion in Biscuit Basin is clear evidence that magma is rising, and that a supervolcano eruption is imminent. That is the first thing that spreads across the internet every time a geyser behaves strangely. People scream that the end is near. But the factual reality is both less apocalyptic and far more immediate. Hydrothermal explosions are shallow events. They are confined almost exclusively to the top 100 to 200 feet of the crust. That is where the superheated groundwater flashes to steam. The gas composition sensors, the GPS ground deformation data, and the deep seismic monitoring by the United States Geological Survey show absolutely zero evidence of magmatic migration. The magma is staying exactly where it is. The energy driving the Biscuit Basin blast came from pressurized water, not magma movement, but this is exactly what makes it so unsettling. If the magma was moving, we would know. We would feel the deep earthquake swarms. We would see the ground uplifting over massive areas. We would have days, weeks, maybe months of warning. We would see the alert level change from green to yellow, then to orange, then to red. The system is designed to catch a magmatic eruption, but a hydrothermal explosion? It bypasses the entire warning system. It lives in the blind spot of our monitoring arrays. It is a localized, instant conversion of water to steam that rips the earth open before the first alarm can even sound. That is the crack in the official narrative. The narrative tells us that Yellowstone is heavily monitored and therefore safe. But the monitoring is looking at the basement, while the fire is starting in the attic. And this is where the historical texts, the ancient warnings, start to sound less like mystical poetry and more like literal descriptions of the hydrothermal plumbing. When Baba Vanga spoke of waters boiling from deep within the earth, she was describing a thermodynamic reality that modern geology has documented exhaustively. Skeptics argue that she prophesied that the Yellowstone supervolcano would erupt and destroy North America. They say she specifically predicted the end of the continent. But again, when you trace those claims back to the verified archival sources from Bulgaria, you find that she never named Yellowstone. She never named any American geographical landmark. The attribution to Yellowstone is a retrospective commentator overlay. It is a modern invention slapped onto her words to generate clicks. What she actually described was earth heating from below and water turning into fire. She used symbolic language to describe a phenomenon where the crust itself becomes a pressure cooker. And when you read her words next to the open file report from 2007, the similarities are chilling. The report talks about hydrothermal seals clogging up, trapping superheated water until the pressure exceeds the tensile strength of the overlying rock. Baba Vanga talked about the pressure building in the hidden waters until the earth could no longer hold it. One is a scientific description of a phase change. The other is a visionary description of the exact same event. Neither of them requires a magmatic supereruption. Both of them point to the shallow, violent, unpredictable boiling of the subterranean reservoirs. Today, I realized just how deeply I had misunderstood the nature of this threat. I was looking through a new batch of data feeds from the global disaster alert systems. I am no longer in the library, but the habit never left me. I cross-reference the geological reports with historical prophetic texts. I build databases. I look for patterns. Today, I was looking at the localized infrasound signatures from the June 13th event. I saw the spike. It was a sharp, aggressive spike on the graph, indicating the exact moment the ground tore open. And then, I looked at the deep seismic timeline for the exact same hour. A flat line. A completely flat line. The earth did not shake before it exploded. I sat there in my office in Springfield staring at the screen. I realized that my entire perspective had been wrong. For decades, I had assumed that the lack of deep seismic activity meant safety. Today, I saw that the lack of deep seismic activity just means the danger is closer to the surface. It means the danger is already past the deep sensors. It is waiting right beneath the boardwalks. This is the second mistake I have made. I trusted the absence of data. I assumed that if the United States Geological Survey was not reporting earthquake swarms, nothing bad could happen. But the USGS releases all raw seismic, thermal, and satellite data publicly and in real time. They are not hiding anything. The data is right there for anyone to see. The problem is not the data. The problem is our interpretation of the data. We have been conditioned to believe that the only threat in Yellowstone is the supervolcano. We have been conditioned to ignore the boiling water right beneath our feet. We look at the green shield and we feel a false sense of security, while the shallow plumbing is quietly, violently shifting. And the skeptics who claim the USGS is hiding the danger levels are missing the point entirely. They scream that tourists were walking the boardwalks right before the ground exploded with zero warning, and they accuse the government of a cover-up. But there is no cover-up. Hydrothermal explosions resist prediction precisely because they require no deep magma movement. They require no major earthquake swarms. You cannot cover up a warning signal that does not exist. The explosion happens because a shallow seal clogs, and the pressure spikes in a matter of hours. The green rating is completely honest about the deep volcanic system, but it cannot protect you from the shallow hydrothermal layer. The danger is not being hidden. It is just inherently invisible until the moment it breaches the surface. This brings us back to the crater at Mary Bay, 1.5 miles wide. Think about the sheer kinetic energy required to carve a hole that size in solid rock using nothing but pressurized steam. Think about what that would look like if it happened today in the middle of a crowded tourist season. The June 13th event created a 60-foot fissure. The July 24th event destroyed a boardwalk. Those are microscopic compared to the historical capability of the park's hydrothermal system. The Earth does not need magma to unleash a catastrophe. It just needs water, heat, and a blocked vent. When you look at the documented archival records, the visions attributed to the blind mystic, you realize she was not warning us about a mountain exploding. She was warning us about the ground beneath our feet. She was warning us about the water. The fire rising from the ground without mountain smoke is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of a hydrothermal blast, and it is happening right now. The ground tore open in Biscuit Basin. The thermal pools are shifting. The plumbing is changing. The one thing she warned about is not a distant apocalyptic event in the future. It is a present, ongoing reality. The crust is fragile. The equilibrium is temporary. The green shield on the dashboard is telling the truth about the deep Earth, but it is completely silent about the shallow Earth. And that silence is what makes the events of June 13th so terrifying. It is the silence before the water flashes to steam. It is the silence of an instrument array that is looking in the wrong direction. We have built our sense of safety on a fundamental misunderstanding of what Yellowstone actually is. It is not just a sleeping giant. It is a massive, active, pressurized boiler room, and the valves are starting to fail. This fundamental misunderstanding is not just a problem for tourists, it is a problem for how we understand the very nature of planetary threats. Because when you read the 1971 paper by Muffler, White, and Truesdell, you realize that the mechanisms they described were not theoretical anomalies. They were outlining the standard operating procedure of the Yellowstone Basin. The sudden pressure drops, the flashing of superheated liquid to steam, the violent ejection of mass. These are not signs of a system failing. They are signs of a system working exactly as it was designed to work. The hydrothermal plumbing is a living, breathing network of pressure valves. And sometimes, those valves blow off. The problem is not the valves. The problem is that we built boardwalks over them, and we convinced ourselves that a green shield on a website meant those valves would never open while we were standing there. Think about the sheer scale of the energy involved. Water expands to 1,700 times its original volume when it flashes into steam. 1,700 times, in a fraction of a second. If that phase change happens deep underground, the expanding steam has nowhere to go but up. It encounters solid rock. It encounters compacted soil. It encounters the roots of trees and the foundations of visitor pathways, and it shatters them all. It throws them into the sky with the force of a military explosive. This is not magma. This is not lava. This is just hot water doing what hot water does when the pressure changes. It is the most mundane substance on Earth, weaponized by the thermodynamics of the crust. And this weaponization is happening more frequently, or at least more visibly. The July 24th event in 2024, the June 13th event in 2026, both in the Biscuit Basin area, both without deep seismic warning. The system is showing us exactly what it is capable of right in front of our eyes. It is showing us that the ground is not stable. It is showing us that the equilibrium is easily broken. The new 60-foot fissure is not just a geological curiosity. It is a scar on the surface of the Earth, a physical record of the violence that lives just inches below the soil. The new thermal pool is not a tourist attraction. It is an open wound, draining milky-grey runoff into the Firehole River. It is the Earth bleeding heat. And when you look at that wound, when you look at the boiling mud and the jagged rocks, you have to ask yourself, what else is boiling down there? The United States Geological Survey has mapped out the major hydrothermal features, but the subterranean network is vast and largely uncharted. We know where the geysers are, but we do not know exactly where the next seal will clog. We do not know exactly where the next pressure spike will occur. We are walking blindfolded across a minefield, relying on a deep Earth sensor array to warn us about shallow Earth landmines. The sensors are deaf to the danger that actually threatens us. This is the true terror of Yellowstone. It is not the apocalyptic super eruption that destroys the continent in a storm of ash. It is the sudden, unpredictable, localized violence of the hydrothermal system. It is the realization that the ground you are standing on can turn into a bomb at any moment, and no scientist, no instrument, and no alert system can give you a warning. The danger is not that the mountain will explode. The danger is that the Earth will simply tear open, quietly without a tremor and unleash a torrent of boiling steam and shattered rock. This is the one thing the ancient visions actually described. This is the reality that the mystics saw. They did not see the end of the world. They saw the violent, unpredictable nature of the shallow crust. They saw the waters boiling from deep within the earth. We have spent decades waiting for the big one. We have spent decades watching the deep seismographs, looking for the telltale signs of magma migration. We have obsessed over the supervolcano, and in doing so, we have completely ignored the immediate physical reality of the park. We have ignored the history of Mary Bay. We have ignored the 1.5-mile crater. We have ignored the repeated warnings of the Biscuit Basin explosions. We have allowed the fear of a massive, unlikely catastrophe to blind us to the certainty of the smaller but equally deadly localized blasts. We have focused on the mountain smoke, and we have missed the fire rising from the ground. And that is why the events of June 13th are so important. They force us to look at the reality of the situation. They force us to acknowledge the limitations of our monitoring systems. They force us to accept that a green alert level does not mean the ground is safe. It just means the magma is quiet. The hydrothermal system is never quiet. It is always boiling. It is always shifting. It is always building pressure. And it will continue to tear the ground open again and again, exactly as it has done for thousands of years. The explosion was not a prophecy of doom. It was a demonstration of facts. The danger in Yellowstone is not a sleeping supervolcano. The danger is the waking water. If you have made it this far, and this investigation has shifted how you see the ground beneath our feet, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It is what allows me to keep digging into these archives, bypassing the sensationalism and bringing you the factual reality of what is actually happening in the world. I don't care about the clickbait. I care about the data and the history and the truth hidden between the lines of the official reports. Your support makes that possible. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. We always hear about the supervolcano, but looking at what just happened in Biscuit Basin, tell me this. Does the threat of an unpredictable localized steam explosion scare you more than the distant possibility of a massive magmatic eruption? Which one actually changes how you feel about walking those boardwalks? Let me know.